and therefore the cost is going up. So the oil-producing countries themselves are also using more of it because their populations are extremely young. They all have very high demands, and you're going to see more of it. Kuwait, for example, is not prepared to now export more oil because they want more for their grandchildren, and the King of Saudi Arabia made the same comment 2 nights ago, actually. He has a conference in Jeddah, I think, on Monday, where we'll see whether they can actually increase production. The global response to all of this, we can either have continued denial, which is what we've been in for the last 10 years, and the market and technology will fix it. The wealthy will win, maybe, but only in the short term. You can have a grudging acceptance of the problem, which says, well, what we have we hold, and we reinforce natural sovereignty, we have bilateral resource deals, resource nationalism, and if need be, military intervention, which was basically what happened in Iraq. On the other hand, you can have an unreserved acceptance that we now have a problem that is much bigger than any nation state. It needs some form of global governance to manage it. It means we have to cede sovereignty in the interests of global stability. And we have to have an equitable sharing of the burden. The Kyoto Protocol was a start in carbon emissions, though it went nowhere near far enough. The oil depletion protocol that a gentleman mentioned is part of it. I believe we're going to get up to the point where we have to have global per capita carbon allocations and probably global per capita oil allocations. Anathema to conventional economists, but I suspect that's the way the world is going. So I would argue that what we're facing is a genuine global emergency. We really do have very little time to move this thing along. We've left it too late. All sorts of things are now converging. And if you'd said this, I think, 6 months ago, you were generally shown the door and viewed as a bit of a rat bag extremist. But increasingly, senior people around the world are making the same comments, and I give you a few of them there. So what does it need? It really needs emergency action. It needs something like the equivalent of the Marshall Plan post-World War II, the Apollo project, the Manhattan Project, the way the economies were turned around pre-World War II itself. You have to redefine success based on long-term sustainability, not short-term or maximising consumption. Markets, you really have to redefine based on the concept of the global commons and not on short-term profit maximisation. It's going to need very different forms of community involvement because the community have to really be into this. I question whether our existing democratic structure can handle it. If you look at what's happened in Canberra in the last 3 weeks, it's pretty clear. But we have to move into looking at different forms of management. It means different opportunities for developed and developing world cooperation in terms of getting on top of this problem. We need new technology, there's no question, but it has to be combined with changing values. We need a new paradigm. The first step is an honest articulation of the problem, which we've not been getting. We're still not getting, we certainly didn't have it from the Howard government. We're still not getting it from the Rudd government, the new government. We have to, before you can put out the solutions, you really have to acknowledge the size of the problem. This is not about primarily economics, it's risk management. And any corporate risk manager will look at this thing and say, hey, guys, we really have a problem, we have to take a different approach. Sure, the economics can help, but it's not the primary driver. The primary driver is to stop the extreme risk exposure. So we need genuine leadership of a different sort, and I think I've gone through most of the points there already, so I won't repeat them. It's going to require maximum cooperation, I think, between community, government and business, and it really does mean we have to dispense with politics as usual. You're not going to solve this with the sort of approaches I think we've seen historically in a problem of this size. This is different. This is not a normal part of the political agenda, and we're tending to assume it is.
My name is Annie Nielsen and I'm from the Parramatta Climate Action Network, and we have been speaking to some of the local MPs, and we have told them, like you have said, that this is really an emergency situation. We can't just go on as business as usual. And they've basically looked at us and said, well, you know, nothing's going to change, as though we're a war or an emergency situation, it's just not going to happen. And then I read in the paper yesterday that Ian McDonald came out and said that New South Wales can't we have to really think carefully about carbon trading, because it's going to, our businesses are going to be disadvantaged compared to other countries, and we can't do that. It seems to me the New South Wales government isn't really listening. What can we and you and everybody else do to change things?
Yeah. Well, I think you should take heart from what's happened in the last 2 years. If you were at the beginning of 2007, you would probably not have thought we had a new government by the end of the year. If you look around the world at what's happening in attitudes toward this, you are now suddenly finding all sorts of groups coming out, particularly authoritative groups like the IEA, who have been in complete denial about this until literally probably about a year ago. They suddenly started putting the flag up and saying, hang on, we seem to have a bit of a problem. Their 2007 Energy Outlook, which came out last November, if you go and look at the website, you'll find the chief economist is saying, listen, if we don't do something in 6 years, the wheels may fall off this energy system. 2 weeks ago, he even made some even more blunt statements. So groups like that, which is the watchdog for energy for the developed world, are suddenly saying, look, this is quite different. And they're not just talking about oil, they're talking about the whole climate issue, which is, I think, one of the slides I put up. So the official view, if I can call it the official future, is suddenly changing. Governments are being advised by the IEA, they're being told very bluntly that they have to change policies quickly. You're finding the head of the UN is coming out with the same stuff. The heads of a number of major oil companies have been making the same point. Very few people are prepared to utter the words peak oil, but nonetheless they're talking about the same thing in slightly different formats. So I think a lot is happening. And on the climate front, I think we're going to see really dramatic change in the course of the next 12 months. The point about it, though, is that it needs community action. It is absolutely critical that the community is putting the pressure on governments at all levels, because it's not something the politicians are going to lead on. This is much too big. It is too hard for them to handle. The system is structured in such a way that it's almost impossible for them. And it needs really maximum pressure, which is, in fact, I would argue, what the Australian community demonstrated last November at the election. That we were not happy with what had been said. We weren't being given the truth. Now, the new government has a mandate, in my view, to take serious action. The issue is going to be, will it use that mandate or will it fudge the issue? Now, the Garnaut report is the crucial litmus test, in a sense. Ross Garnaut, who's doing it, has made some very blunt statements about this problem, and he's, I suppose, on a similar wavelength to myself in terms of the size of it. I hope he'll come out with a very blunt report, which will be really quite sweeping change. I mean, this is going to hit everybody, but we have to recognise that that's what we actually need. And the question will then be, well, is the government actually going to pick this up and do something, or is it going to fudge it and you know, we're back in the same old arguments again?
Alan?